From the Gospel according to Matthew, we're encountering once again a situation in which Jesus is being tested by the leaders of the day. From Matthew 22. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." So is the reading of God's holy word. Invite us to pray. Oh God, these sacred words from the Gospel of Matthew are a great distillation of the gospel message down to two commandments. In that sense, they are simple, but they are not easy. So help us in the hours, days, and weeks to come to live out these two instructions from the living Christ. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. Well, the expression goes, "Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me." And at this point in the Jesus story, the powers that be hadn't resorted to the sticks and stones yet. That would come later in a big way. Well, for now, those who were threatened by the radical rabbi were conducting a war of words and logic. And I suppose the thinking was that if they gave the good teacher enough legal rope, he'd hang himself. But mixing metaphors a little bit here, in order to appreciate the quicksand into which they were trying to lure Jesus, we need to understand one simple fact about the Jewish faith. Whereas we have our two great commandments, the Jews' commandments numbered 613. And we think the tax code is bad. And it is. To put a more personal spin on this, bring it back to home, imagine that you are the proud grandparent of a whole brood of grandchildren, and someone puts that nefarious question to you, "Which grandchild do you love most?" Whichever way you answer, it's not going to go well. Well, Jesus was almost in this same kind of pickle. He wasn't running the risk of alienating his family in that same way, but he was facing the prospect of religious and political suicide. Every one of those 613 commandments were taken very seriously. Once again, he faced an impossible question. And his response, of course, forms the very foundation of our Christian faith and our Christian behavior. Love God fully and love our neighbor as ourselves. Of course, the pivotal word in this thing is love, which one songwriter many years ago described as a many-splendored thing. It's also a mighty confusing thing. So often in romantic literature and music, love becomes a high sucrose pink cloud of babbling bliss, perhaps something like a cotton candy of the brain. And thank God for that sort of love. Because for one thing, it perpetuates the species. But of course, love is so much more than that. In a few days, we'll round the corner toward one of the lesser-known holidays on the calendar, a day known as All Saints' Day, November 1st. And if Valentine's Day is observed by giving candy and flowers, and at Christmas we exchange brightly wrapped presents, I'm not really sure how we observe All Saints' Day. I suppose we could exchange halos. I don't think it'd catch on, though. But All Saints' Day is a celebration of love, though a bit different from Valentine's Day. It's a day when we lift up people in our lives, or at least people in our consciousness, who have in some way embodied these two great commandments that Jesus articulated. But it's a tricky holiday because saints aren't always obvious. Whereas Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny are readily recognizable, saints can be pretty well disguised. They can even look a little trashy. I'll take you back a little bit into some history. On Groundhog Day, coincidentally, 1968, the New York City sanitation workers went on strike for better wages and benefits. And after a long and smelly week, trash in the Big Apple was in some places chest high. Eventually, a new contract was reached and a major health catastrophe was ended. But just as that strike was ending in New York City, another sanitation strike was beginning in Memphis. This one on the heels of a tragic accident in which two black sanitation workers were killed in a malfunctioning truck. Now, just days before his assassination, Martin Luther King addressed this group of workers in Memphis, encouraging persistence in the nonviolent quest for social justice. Sanitation workers, by their nature, or the nature of their work, have to get dirty. And they get dirty for the sake of you and me. And I want to submit to all of you that those who want to live out the great commandments need to be willing to get dirty too. We often elevate saints, depicting them as floating high above the squalid issues of life, suspended somewhere far removed from the indecencies of living. And yet, love, and I don't mean the cotton candy variety, but the Christ-like sort, is often found hard at work, right down in the dregs of daily existence. The great love that Jesus describes is neither clean nor romantic. This sort of love, I think, is probably best described as an inclination of the heart. The way that our heart is oriented, the way it tilts, is what matters. The theologian Marcus Borg wrote the following. He said, "The character of the heart depends upon its orientation, what it's pointed toward." I kind of played with that imagery a little bit. It brought me back to a recollection of walking down Levi Corser Park. And when I'm going around that oval, I have several opportunities to inspect the solar panels mounted on a large pedestal just to the west of the park. And that panel's built so as to be able to follow the sun and maximize the energy absorption. It's a good reminder, I found it to be. Not only do I gain power in orienting myself toward God, but I find purpose in orienting myself toward neighbor. What matters is the tilt of the heart. And it's not always easy to set our hearts tilted in that way. Every age has its temptations, ways of avoiding connection and community. And it's an age-old challenge to stay engaged and to continue to care. We've got a temptation these days. Smartphones are all the rage. Got one myself. And along with all the benefits of fingertip facts and 24/7 news and weather whenever you want it, there is a downside that's coming to the surface these days. It's a phenomenon that some creative English major dubbed as phubbing. P-H-U-B-B-I-N-G, phubbing, or phone snubbing. Picture a group of people, you may have actually seen this, seated at a table together, maybe in a coffee shop, all staring at their phones. All at the same table. No talking. And as comical as the image can be, it has created real problems in relationships when people feel phoed. One study, it's kind of interesting and a little bit, well, a little worrisome, found that 81% of people will check their phone at least once during dining out at a restaurant. If that's the case, I figure they ought to go to a place with better food. Another finding was that the average American checks his or her phone 46 times, 46 a day. I mean, we're not awake 24 hours, most of us. That's quite a few times an hour. Hopefully we're not doing it while driving. Right. But what's the explanation for this behavior? Well, somebody else came up with a funny acronym. FOMO. FOMO. Fear of missing out. Missing out on something other than what's right in front of us. Right across the table, right across the street is where we find our neighbor. The one that God is calling us to love. And loving the one right next to us is often harder than loving someone far away in the abstract. It can get messy with the ones right in front of us. And we might just confront our own less than saintly instincts and our deep need for Christ as we attempt to do that. One public servant made this remark that I wanted to share with you. He said, "Too often we judge other groups by their worst examples, while judging ourselves by our best intentions." George W. Bush. The image of God right in front of us. Now, I love Halloween, even if nobody comes to my house. I'll buy candy anyway, just for me. And it is a holiday that honors the candy industry and the American Dental Association. And it's ever so creative with its get-ups. But if Halloween is all about disguising and, in a sense, hiding, perhaps the next day, All Saints' Day, is about revealing the love of God. Making that love just a little bit more apparent and real in the light of day. So if in the days following Halloween this year, you happen to be driving through the hamlet of Cheshire, you see all the trees draped in toilet paper, perhaps it can bring back to mind two things. First, the great sanitation strikes of an earlier day, and those largely unsung heroes of community life, sanitation workers. And secondly, the call of Christ to roll up our sleeves, get messy, and go about that great work of loving God and neighbor in the name of Christ. I wish you all, truly, many encounters with saints of all kinds.